Hello, and welcome to the Burlington Mayor Show for the month of July. I am excited to be joined today by the Communications Director for the City of Burlington, a key member of the Mayor's Office, Samantha Sheehan, and we are meeting we're doing this broadcast at the end of July, and it's been a big few days for housing, and we thought we'd talk about that. There's a few things we'll talk about. We'll talk about an action that the City Council took this past Monday that follows on the heels of about 18 months of work and is a big zoning change in the South End. We'll talk a little bit about the next big zoning issue that we're working on, which we're calling the Neighborhood Code, which would be a citywide rezoning effort. And then finally, we'll talk about a piece of statewide legislation that would have a big impact in Burlington that we have sort of coined the term, we co-opted the term, I guess, municipal delegation, and it's an interesting issue. All of these are housing issues. All these, I'm sure you're tired, Samantha, of hearing me say, all these are grounded in my strong belief, something I've always believed, and which has been exciting to see really be widely accepted in just the last few years. There's been kind of a sea change, and I think a lot of people believe this now too, is that we have a big housing problem, we have a big homelessness problem, and the core fundamental reason that is driving that, not everything, but in large part, this problem has been driven by the fact that we have made it really hard to build new homes in Vermont, in Burlington, in many parts of the country, and we've done that through our local rules and through our state rules. And it's gotten to an unacceptable level. It's gotten to a point where we have 250 unsheltered people in Chittenden County. It's gotten to a point where there's been a sustained period now with a 0.5% vacancy rate, about a tenth of what you want for a kind of healthy vacancy rate. It's gotten to the point where young families have almost no chance of buying a home in Burlington and getting started. There's been a huge run-up in prices in Burlington in just the last few years. And to turn that around, I really think there's only one solution, which is one overarching solution, and it's going to take lots of different individual actions, but we need to build a lot more homes. This is a supply problem, a housing supply problem. Some people doubt that. You still hear some debate that this is maybe there's something else going on. This is about mental health. This is about drugs, and we do have a serious drug problem. We have serious mental health challenges. That is not what is driving the level of homelessness we're seeing out there. That is not what is driving the housing challenges we're facing. It is a shortage of homes. And we got ourselves into this problem. We can get ourselves out by reversing and changing the rules that have gotten us here, and that's what we're trying to do. So we'll break them each down, and I think you got, Samantha, keyed up the South End Innovation District. Do you want to say anything to kick this part off, or you want to ask me questions, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, so I'll just, I guess, repeat something that you said to the City Council as they were considering adopting the zoning amendment, which is that this is the most dramatic single action that the City Council and the City of Burlington could take to address the housing crisis that we're in now. And in sort of one swoop have enabled potentially over 1,000 new homes to be built where it was illegal to build them before. So this slide just walks us through the highlights of the proposed zoning amendment, which exists currently, or what it was before was the South End Enterprise Light District, a pretty vibrant manufacturing and arts community in the South End.
I'd say areas of the district are vibrant. This particular area that we targeted, so it's a big stretch of Burlington.
Let's just look at it.
The total area is the total area goes north of what you're seeing here on the map, and it goes south along Flint Avenue, and it's probably about 3 times the size of this area. And I would agree that the northern and southern sections of this are successful and vibrant areas of the city. This section, the center section, has a little bit going on, and it's got the new hula development, which is remarkable on the west side. You can kind of see it in the triangle right right up against the lake, west of the railroad tracks there, and then you got the DPW building, the Burlington Electric Department building, and you've got the old manufacturing building that's now we call the Innovation Center that has some exciting office space in it, and then almost everything else in the district is parking lot. And
13 acres of parking lot.
And what to me to have this vast acreage of parking in what is otherwise a really vibrant and important part of the city is a sign that we didn't have the policy right there. And so what we did this past Monday is legalize housing for the first time in decades in this district. And importantly, we didn't just make it legal to put housing there. We really, we put for Burlington standards, quite high height limit on this area. It sort of steps up at the edges of the district. It has a 4-story limit, then it quickly jumps to 6 stories, and on a big chunk of the site, you're allowed to build up to 8 stories. So we'll allow a very considerable amount of housing and other construction to happen in this rezoned district. There is, what you're looking at here is, kind of a elevated view where you can really see in the foreground this parcel that is owned by the city and that is owned by the people by Russ Scully and his partners at Hula. They own about 2/3 of what you're seeing. And Champlain College owns a substantial piece of land there as well. And so already, in anticipation of the zoning, those 3 parties are working together in an MOU that seeks to redevelop this area and quickly build hundreds of homes, maybe about 700 homes. And so when I say that, in one, there's very rarely that by a single act of the city council you can go from a situation where there's no housing allowed to the potential for potentially over 1,000 homes to be built in the years ahead in this area. And the council embraced it and voted unanimously to support this. Not only did the council vote unanimously, and this is just shocking to me, Samantha, I think anyone who's watched the debates about housing the South End, this district just a few years ago, will remember there was really extreme controversy about the idea of changing the zoning there at all. This time, we had a public hearing before the vote, and there was only supportive voices. The only person who said anything critical was the guy who came out to say, please pass this tonight. I can't believe it took as long as it did to get this common sense piece of legislation passed. So that was really just, I think, an indication of just how far public opinion has shifted to really prioritize the need for building more homes.
And really just over about 6 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I can't remember exactly when they were making paper mache puppets of me and at the South End Art Hop in protest to the discussion of housing, but it wasn't that long ago, yeah.
There were some hot debates about that in this studio. I've watched them, and you can find them on YouTube.
I'm sure that's right. I'm sure that's right. So I think that largely covers it. I'm grateful to Ben Travers, who chaired the City Council Ordinance Committee and did a lot of hard work with his other colleagues on that committee, Sarah Carpenter, Zariah Hightower, Joan Shannon, and got this done. Unanimously. Unanimously at the council. There was some debate over some amendments, but I don't think we need to go into those. We'll stay with the zoning theme, and there's no rest for the weary. We are hoping the ordinance committee and our planning and zoning staff will very quickly take up what may be ultimately an even more ambitious rezoning, which is what we're calling the neighborhood code. The neighborhood code, here's the basic idea with the neighborhood code. Until the 1990s, a lot of different forms of housing were legal in Burlington. And you can really you can see this in that map. Back in 1947, really almost everywhere in the city, we've sort of taken the downtown out of this analysis because that's sort of different. But pretty much the great majority of the rest of the land in Burlington, as you can see on that graph on the far left, allowed for single-family homes. It also allowed for apartment buildings, duplexes, triplexes, boarding houses, et cetera. And in the 70s, started this process here in Burlington, and this was very common around the country, of kind of scaling that back. There were a number of different concerns that were driving it. There was this growing sense that you could use zoning to ensure property values by limiting what could be built on nearby parcels. I'm not sure it ever was a theory that really made that sense, but it really took hold. It did become a tool to really limit what could happen next to you, for good or bad. And that there was some of that in the 70s that accelerated in the 90s. And so as a result, if you walk around the city, you can see a lot of buildings that are older than, that were built in the
Some examples.
Here are older buildings that are not single-family homes. These are kind of naturally. This is sort of what affordable housing used to look like, where you would have multiple households living in the same structure, there are a lot of efficiencies in terms of land, in terms of construction costs, and you have shared walls, you have sometimes shared heating systems. It can be a much less expensive way to build and much more compact. You can get a lot more homes in on the same amount of land. In most of the city today, in about almost 70% of the city, all of those structures there.
Over 80%.
Over 80% of the city, all of those structures would be illegal. And I'd say there's no good reason for them to be illegal. And I think most people agree with that. So we're looking to reverse this understanding that these rules have gotten in the way of new homes being created. We're looking to really reverse them and re-legalize these older forms of housing throughout the city. And that's what this initiative is. We've been doing it in partnership. We have a really exciting partner on this. The AARP has a local chapter, and it's really quite interesting, the AARP, which we all think of as the advocacy group that protects Social Security, and that is their biggest issue. But right behind that has been these livability issues they've gotten very active in, and the local chapter really sees this as an important part of being a city that is good to age in. This really offers a lot of potential benefits to older Burlingtonians to have a variety of housing types and affordable housing types within the city. So they've been a partner on this, and there's been about a year of discussion of this already. I really think this initiative is going to accelerate in the coming months. It's my hope that we would be in position to put something for action in front of the City Council by the end of the year. Perhaps it's a little unclear how this is going to roll out. Maybe it will be, instead of one big rezoning all at once for big swaths of the city, it may get broken out. Maybe we're going to do it kind of issue by issue. Megan Tuttle, our outstanding planning director, is sort of still working hard to figure that out. But it's now that the South End Innovation District is out of the way, I think this is really going to be the top priority of the zoning office and the planning office in the weeks ahead. Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, neighborhood code, which our planning team has been working with ARP on for over a year, as you said, neighborhood code and its goals and even some of the specifics that it looks at in terms of zoning and its relationship with density is reflected in the state's omnibus housing bill that passed in the last legislative session, which is called S100. But the debate there was not these really practical changes to local zoning in order to make these homes that do exist in our communities legal to build new. But the controversy was really the lack of attention by the legislature to also reform statewide land use law in that bill, which we all know is governed almost entirely by Act 250. And so the city of Burlington and you and also some of our neighboring communities like Winooski, South Burlington, have come together and endorsed this concept called municipal delegation. So you want to explain what that is to folks? Or maybe let's start with why it's important, which is that it costs people who are building homes a lot of money in permitting.
Yeah, that's right. So, I think what the action the legislature took last year may end up being significant in a lot of communities. It has elements of it that may have some impact on Burlington. I think they're really more aimed at communities that have been more reluctant to create housing opportunities, and it kind of, at some level, is supposed to, we'll see how it works. I hope it works out, is really kind of pushing all Vermont municipalities to do their share to allow housing to be built in their communities. We were disappointed that it did not go further to reform Act 250. The issue that I have been very focused on for some time now with Act 250 is the redundant element of it. There are a lot of projects that in Vermont that have to go through both a very rigorous, comprehensive local zoning review and then also go through a state Act 250 review. That is very unusual in this country. There really isn't any other state in the country that has that kind of detailed dual review at both the state and local level. California has, which have their own problems, has a kind of environmental review at the statewide level, but even that is different than what Act 250 does, which really gets into these very granular details that in the case of Burlington and not everywhere, but a number of other municipalities in Vermont have already been reviewed at the local level. And
in some cases, under Burlington zoning bylaws, we have a more exacting standard.
In many of the areas we do. They're more specific and they're more measurable, and so more rigorous what's expected in the local ordinance. And some people may say, well, what's the harm of just kind of being sure of having a couple processes? Well, the harm is that it takes a lot of time and money for a project to go through both of these levels. There was a study just a few years ago that looked at the handful of properties that get exemptions from this dual process and found that on average those projects saved about $50,000 in fees alone by being able to skip that second review and 7 months of time. As someone who used to build housing, there's really kind of nowhere where it's more true than in real estate that time is money, and that 7 months can be extremely challenging when you're trying to take a project to the start. And that really doesn't fully count it. That doesn't fully capture the cost, and that was only permit costs. It doesn't count the professional costs that are necessary to, if you're going to go through another review, you got to bring out your lawyers and your environmental scientists and your architects and your engineers. There are tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars often for a major project of design and engineering and legal fees involved. And what is not even captured in that, all that, is there are a lot of people that look at this and say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go through these two levels of review, and a project never gets built. So I think this is a big problem. I think it is one of the biggest regulatory barriers in Vermont to the creation of new homes. I say that from experience of having, years ago, back before I was mayor, having had to take a project through both levels, and I know it almost killed that project that we had to do that. It was a very challenging thing to do. We eventually got it built. This is the Packer Loft project on North Avenue, which I'm proud of.
How many years was it to get?
It took us 5 years to get through the entire process. Now, some of that was my inexperience, and it was the first project I was doing in Vermont like that. But a lot of it was the system, and I've always thought this is something we need to fix. And we came up with this idea for how to fix it, and we call it municipal delegation. And it's based in this idea that has a precedent in the law. There are other regulations where the state delegates to municipality the responsibility for performing those regulations. The best example of that, and the one that I kind of discovered a number of years ago and got me thinking about this, was the way we regulate our lake shores. The state passed a new lakeshore protection bill a few years ago, but when they were creating that, they're like, Burlington is already doing this, so why recreate the wheel? Let's give Burlington the opportunity to do this instead of us. And we were really trying to build off that concept that for cities that are already doing a comparable review to Act 250, could this be delegated? And we gave a lot of testimony on this last year. We developed with the planners in South Burlington and Winooski an actual legislative proposal that got in front of a number of committees. It didn't quite, people weren't ready. There was kind of a mantra in Montpelier last year that they were going to look first at the local rules, and in 2023 they were going to look at state rules. So we hope to hold them to that, and we are doing some work over the summer to make sure that this is legislation that's ready to go next year. And if it passes, it will, for many projects in Vermont, cut in half the permitting costs and time, and that will be a big step forward.
And the beauty of it is that if we are to achieve municipal delegation, it compromises nothing in terms of environmental protection that is so critical in Act 250.
Yeah, really, thank you, Samantha. Really key point. You know, if there was some important catches that were happening at the Act 250 level that were saving important wetlands or
preventing
kind of hard to envision.
CSO,
but yeah.
Preventing CSOs.
Yeah, great. Preventing lake quality from getting worse. Then maybe you'd say it was worth it. But one of the really striking pieces of testimony that our planning director gave to the legislature was that she had polled Burlington officials, South Burlington, Winooski officials. No one could think of a significant change that had been made by the Act 250 review on a project in any of those three municipalities in the last 10 to 15 years. And you know, if that's even close to true, and maybe that's a little hyperbolic, maybe we're going to find something that changed a bit, but you know, if that's even close to true, that's scandalous, right? Like, what are we doing? Putting valuable public employee time into this review that's redundant and unnecessary, taking the hard-earned dollars of our constituents and wasting them amidst a housing crisis. It really is. It's something. This is a really significant thing that should be an easy decision for the legislature to make next year. I know there's a lot of emotion around Act 250. I think there's a lot of a sense that what keeps that Act 250 has played an important role in keeping Vermont special and keeping the landscape here special. And I think there's some truth to that. I think but what is more threatening, I think, to the character of Vermont is if we don't figure out a way to allow homes to get built in the areas of the state that we need it. I think it's far more threatening to the character of Vermont if we become a place that only really wealthy people or people getting substantial government help can live in, and it really undermines that character if you can't build in Burlington and Winooski and South Burlington and you're pushing development outside of areas that have local zoning. That's not really helping, I think, accomplish any of the goals of Act 250. So this is a really important thing to get done right if we're going to work our way out of this housing crisis anytime soon.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think those are the big three immediate housing issues that we are working on right now. There's a lot else going on, of course, in housing. There's a lot else going on in all sorts of municipal issues, public safety, energy. We've had a busy summer already, and there's more on tap. So we will be back in August with the next edition of the Mayor's Show. Until then, have a great summer. Enjoy the great Vermont outdoors, and we'll see you soon.